Okay, question 3, the experiences of Indigenous Australians when they use health services. So, according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, it's a known fact that Indigenous Australians are less likely to access health services compared to non Indigenous Australians. In 2008, Indigenous Australians reported problems accessing healthcare services, such as long waiting lists, even the cost of healthcare itself. Barriers to accessing these services include obviously language barriers, transport, obviously money is a big issue, as I mentioned before, lack of communication and understanding, like I mentioned, technology, and even the internet. Now, getting lack of these services for Indigenous Australians can obviously affect health outcomes and quality of life. One study found that there are reports of racism being involved when it comes to treating this population group. For example, an Australian doctor or a physiotherapist or another allied health professional treating a an Indigenous Australian found that there can be racism involved because they might not provide the standard quality of care, or they might make remarks that might be seen discrimination or prejudice and so on. This can then affect the social determinants of health, especially the social aspect. So Indigenous Australians might not want to meet new friends or new people. Therefore, it affects their health, their well-being, their mental health, their physical health even. And that's a very important factor. So these are the experiences that that Indigenous Australians are experiencing when accessing healthcare services. It can affect their whole life. And many Indigenous Australians live in remote and rural areas, and therefore accessing these mainstream services can be quite difficult. Now, this leads on to another issue, which means it can affect their mental health, which therefore can affect their overall well-being. Okay, question 4, the health needs of Middle Eastern people in Australia, which is our population group. So according to our Wellness Group report, there are health inequalities among many different population groups in Australia. It's also reported in that report that people that are born overseas, such as Middle Eastern people that migrate to Australia, are hospitalised at a much higher rate compared to Australians that are born in Australia due to chronic conditions and so on, because they are obviously more prone to those chronic conditions. Also reported that migrants from Middle Eastern continents there that migrate to Australia with low education levels can find it very difficult to find a job, employment, go to school. So that's another key factor in terms of a health need, and therefore that affects their overall health. It's important to note also that education and money also affect health, and these are known as the social determinants of health. We know that in health that medical factors are not the only factors that contribute to health, like preventing illnesses. We know that there are social determinants of health that affect our health. It's important to address these non-medical factors so that people can live a fulfilled and balanced life. Now, if we talk about chronic conditions, diabetes is very high in Middle Eastern people from that sector compared to the Australian-born population. Now, this is very significant from an economic point of view because it's costing the Australian healthcare system a lot of money, billions of dollars. And so that's very significant, and that's a health need that needs to be filled. Young people living in Australia, young Middle East people living in Australia, also face enormous challenges, opportunities, and changes. And this can affect their health. For example, they might choose to stick to their own culture or merge to another culture, and this can be a health gap, and it could identify a health need in check when they grow up, for example. And once again, health needs are affected here because we're talking about medical factors like diabetes that was mentioned before, and non-medical factors like education and money, which is very relevant to Middle Eastern people living in Australia or that are going to migrate to Australia. So it's very important to consider all these issues.